Hello. Today's video is something completely different than I've ever done here on my YouTube channel. And that is because I actually had a nightmare last night. And that nightmare brought me to where I am at right now. It came from a TikTok that I had seen a few months ago, and something made it pop into my brain last night, and I had a nightmare about it. And then when I woke up this morning, I thought, I heard that on TikTok, and I don't know if it's as true as my brain is telling me that it is. So I went researching it, and not only is it true, it is horrifying. And I feel, specifically since polling you all on my Instagram, that it is not widely known. It should be. And it is something that needs to end. And I feel the responsibility that because I have a platform here to tell you guys about something that you've probably never heard of and that is going to be horrifying. So get ready, because it's something. So I'm going to put a trigger warning here. Today's video is going to be discussing the unconsensual touch of a body. I don't want to go too much more into detail of what it's going to be, but if that is going to be really, really hard for you to hear, and this is hard to hear, it is something that's happening routinely. It's in the medical field. So I just want to preface this by saying there are going to be some things talked about here that may be a little bit concerning. So it might be a video to skip. But if you are somebody in the United States, and not even just the United States, it seems like this is happening in other countries as well, from what I've understood. People in the UK, I've had some people in Ireland say that this happens there as well. So I think this is probably a worldwide issue that just not a lot of people know about. I just want to get into it. So I asked you guys on my Instagram stories. I have a question or poll in the next slide. It may be triggering to some. Trigger warning, unconsensual physical touch, so please skip if needed. But I just wanted to know, were you aware that in many states, when under anesthesia, doctors can perform pelvic exams on you and have multiple students do the same without your consent or without ever informing you? Here were the results. So here were the results. 90% of you said no, 10% of you said yes. With the knowledge that this is happening in the very little research that I've done, a bit of a responsibility to let 90% of you know that this is a thing that happens. And I'm just gonna read to you an article. Probably gonna be putting some makeup on while I do this. I don't know. Just to give you something that's a little more lighthearted while I'm reading something like this. Not very good. I don't want to be doing this. I hate it, but I don't know what else to do. This is really uncomfortable to talk about, but we're gonna be talking about pelvic exams, vaginal exams, potentially prostate exams, and lack of consent. This is an article written in Healthy Women. There are many articles. They are legit. This isn't like just some conspiracy or anything. This is all very legitimate information. This was written in 2021, but this is still relevant today, and I will read to you exactly what it says. When patients go to the hospital, they expect to receive medical attention, not to be subjected to non-consensual examinations. In 2007, Ashley Whites, a 37-year-old mother in Utah, went to the emergency room seeking treatment for nausea and vomiting. Whites was sedated with promethazine to stop the vomiting. Approximately 45 minutes later, she woke up horrified to discover that her feet were in stirrups, her underwear had been removed, and the doctor was performing an invasive vaginal exam. He claimed that he was swabbing her to test for sexually transmitted infections, but Whites did not consent to a pelvic exam. In fact, Whites and the doctor had already discussed her medical history and agreed that an internal exam was not necessary. Whites was traumatized. In any other setting, someone putting their fingers into my vagina without my consent is assault. I did not consent to this exam, and he did it anyway. Non-consensual pelvic exams are still happening. White's experience is not unique. I first spoke with her in 2019, and while there have been some legislative changes since then in some states, what happened to White's is still happening to other patients. Non-consensual pelvic exams happen in teaching hospitals where many states allow medical students to perform internal exams on unconscious patients without their consent or knowledge. I'm just going to keep reading. I'll get into my opinions in a second. If my face doesn't describe it itself with this, what the fuck? This is frequently done for the purpose of teaching students how to perform this type of exam. Although more common with pelvic exams, there have also been some reports of non-consensual prostate exams that have been done while the patient is anesthetized. Heaven help me if I don't want to just rage. A recent survey of 101 medical students from 7 American medical schools found that 92% had performed pelvic exams on anesthetized female patients, 61% of whom reported not having explicit consent from the patients. So out of that 92%, 61% of them, there was no consent given. This abusive practice violates a patient's right to their own bodily autonomy, and these exams are often done for the benefit of the student, not the patient, said Weitz, who now advocates for legislation prohibiting non-consensual exams. Weitz' direct testimony helped pass a law restricting non-consensual exams in Utah in 2018. Similar laws have also recently been passed in New York, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Washington, and Florida. California, Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Virginia, and Oregon have also banned this practice. Legislation is pending in other states, including Arizona and Connecticut, despite ongoing pressure from Yale Medical School, which opposes the legislation restricting non-consensual exams. The pandemic may have hindered additional legislation after courthouses had to close in 2020. Several states, including Texas, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Minnesota, had bills die in the 2019 to 2020 legislative session. Weitz is calling for states to reintroduce these bills and for federal legislation, since many states still have not addressed this problem. That's very few. There are 50 states, so we still have a huge way to go. I mean, that's just like nothing. But Weitz cautions that even with legislative changes, non-consensual exams can still happen. Recent laws stop the most egregious violations, such as someone coming in for shoulder surgery and a non-consensual pelvic exam being done while they are anesthetized. But exceptions written into some of these laws related to gynecological surgeries still raise concerns. The exceptions made for an emergency or life-threatening situation are necessary. But exceptions surrounding gynecological surgeries are alarming. Just because a patient is having a procedure on that part of their body does not mean that multiple medical students should be allowed to perform pelvic exams, Weitz says. In recent years, some medical students have spoken out about being required to do non-consensual exams, but fear of reprisal is common. Dr. Heather Bartos, an OBGYN who is the medical director of B Women's Health and Wellness in Texas, a member of Healthy Women's Health Advisory Council, said that when she was in medical school, up to 5 medical students at a time performed exams on unconscious patients who did not know it was happening. It literally makes me sick. It makes me physically ill. I'll continue. It made me uncomfortable. I met with patients and let them know how I was involved in their care, but divulging this information was not standard practice. There were no real discussions happening around patient consent. Non-consensual pelvic exams are sexual assault. Bartos added that things still have not changed in many hospitals. Doctors often see themselves as helping people, and it's difficult for some to acknowledge that long-standing medical practice is harmful. Medical battery, when a doctor performs a non-emergency medical procedure without getting a patient's consent first, is just as significant as other forms of trauma and can have lifelong-term implications on a person's physical and mental health, Dr. Bartos explained. Unless it's an emergency and consent cannot be obtained, these exams violate patients and students. A non-consensual exam is an assault on a patient, and forcing students to do them is harmful. But if students speak up, they can be penalized. I can't even believe this is real and this is what I'm reading. I was fully expecting it to be like, my brain made this worse than it was. In fact, I feel like it made it less bad than it was. Some hospitals still defend this practice, claiming patients consenting to surgery is sufficient, and they don't need explicit consent for students to perform internal exams. Tell me the name of these fucking hospitals, I'll tell you what right now. But oftentimes, institutions performing non-consensual exams use vague consent forms that reference students being involved in patient care. But they don't specify that they may perform vaginal exams, which raises the question, if these institutions don't think that they are doing anything wrong, why not just get explicit consent? Dr. Daniel Sokol, a London-based medical ethicist and lawyer, said over email that arguing that patients implicitly gave consent by signing a generic form is far-fetched. There is a world of difference between agreeing to medical students being involved in your care and agreeing to them performing an invasive pelvic examination. Healthcare disparities, systemic racism, and differences in how insured and uninsured patients are treated can also play a role in making vulnerable populations at higher risk of being given these types of exams. Marginalized patients often have limited choices in which hospital that they go to, and teaching hospitals often provide higher rates of care in vulnerable communities. Marlene Francois Madden, a clinical social worker in New Jersey, said this can put marginalized patients at risk. There is often not a lot of explanation given to vulnerable patients about the forms that they sign. Sometimes they're not even given patients' preferred language. Patients are just expected to sign it quickly and move on. Not all medical schools perform non-consensual exams. Some use paid pelvic trainers, people who consent to students performing exams on them and who also give feedback. And some hospitals have updated their policies on obtaining consent, leading some providers to claim that legislation isn't necessary if they are already already getting consent. But Bartos said that legislation is still necessary. Without a legal deterrent, patients are not as protected, and the laws requiring consent can protect the patient and medical provider. Whites continues to fight for legislative change and works with medical students to educate them on consent and trauma-informed care. Consent needs to be centered in patient care. The belief that providers don't need to ask before doing an invasive exam denies patients their agency and ignores the harm non-consensual exams cause. It is important to remember that women are not property, and healthcare providers should not be permitted to do just what they want with them at will. Women should be the ones making the decisions about what happens to their bodies. Always. Period. I was reading articles first thing in the morning this morning, probably not the thing that I should have been doing right when my eyes woke up this morning. However, I had had a dream about this happening to me, and I thought, God, is that actually real? I had heard it on TikTok. Now, I don't know the original creator because I saw the video come across my page. I don't even think I saw it on TikTok. I think I saw it on Instagram, somebody reposting it. I don't think this is common knowledge. If you don't have TikTok or watch Reels or have social media, you probably wouldn't know this. And from the poll that I did on my Instagram, it seems as though 90% of you did not know this. And this, I feel, should be common knowledge. First of all, it shouldn't happen, but second of all, it should be common knowledge because this affects every single one of us. All of us. It affects all of us. If you had to go into surgery, now you have to, by all rights, go in there and explicitly state, you are not to touch my pelvis. You are not to open up my vagina. You're not to have your students come in here and touch me. No, because I have consented to having students be in the room with me during like a ton of my procedures. There's almost always a student in there, and I'm totally cool with that, with my consent. The way I would feel violated if I found out that I woke up from a surgery and that 5-6 students had given me an invasive pelvic exam without my knowledge, I feel like you'd have to restrain me from the absolute anger and horrific distrust and violation that I would feel in my body. It's my body, and you don't get to just poke and prod at it because I'm under anesthesia. First of all, they make these anesthesia forms extremely difficult to sign. You're not going to read the whole thing, and they know you're not going to, so they might sneakily put it in some sort of, jargon or verbiage that you don't understand or even understand that you're signing away to. And then you might even be saying like you think that it's okay without even knowing it's in there. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, you're basically just saying that you're giving us permission to do your surgery. And then you sign it because you can't get surgery without it. And then bada bing, bada boom, you've got a freaking teaching hospital all up in you. So there are a lot of different websites with this information on it. This is pretty well known. I wouldn't say it's well known around with people, but I would say that this is in the news. So just a couple of different places that have published articles on it, which I will have linked in the description of this video. New York Times, Forbes, healthywomen.org, ncbi.nlm.nih.gov, which is like the medical website, Columbia Library, the Epstein Health Labs, Commonwealth, Medscape, med.upenn. It's absolutely like across the board being talked about, but a lot of these are back from 2020, 2019, 2018. So I don't really see a lot of people talking about it currently. So this says, as of 2019, 7 states, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, Utah, and Virginia have such laws against pelvic examination under anesthesia, and others are considering them. So I think that it would be really important for all of us to check into our own state laws and what that means in regards to pelvic exams under anesthesia, so that we, knowing now what we know from this, that we need to be proactive in saying no. Like, get away from me! Get your hands off me! I just feel so horrified and disappointed that this is just one aspect of the world that a lot of us are just now becoming privy to. And it's very scary to know that this is just one area. Now, I want to also say in here that I don't have issue with the medical system in the United States. Like, I don't want people to think that this is me like shitting on nurses and doctors, and especially the people that feel in their, residency or wherever you are in your schooling to become a doctor, if you have to perform these exams and you're going to be, there are going to be repercussions if you say no, like that puts these people in a really uncomfortable and vulnerable space to be in, because it's like their livelihood, it's their passion, it's their dream. Like, they've been wanting to do this forever, and then now, like, if they say no or they push back, it's got to be hard for them. At the same time, like, I think about all of the patients who's had this happen to them and have no idea. And that's the thing, like, it's not even like that a lot of these people might not be dealing with the repercussions of like the trauma response because of how this happened to them. A lot of them probably have no idea that this happened to them. And it's horrific to even imagine that people have no clue that they had just been completely violated in such an a heinous way. So I saw one of these different articles that I was reading, and let me try to find it. Hang on. So I'll read this article, but there was one of them who said 75 to 100% of the people that they asked, maybe they were like gynecology surgeries or something like that. They might have even just been like typical surgeries, like a tonsillectomy, for God's sakes. And I think they asked like a whole group of women, can we do this exam on you during anesthesia? And 100% of them said no. And so the guy was like, they don't want us to. So like, but we need to be doing these exams. And he's like, doesn't this like raise the case for consent then? Because they're saying no. When you ask them, they don't want you to. So that tells you they don't want you to. All right, so I'm going to read this article from Forbes, but I'm going to continue doing my makeup because I feel anxious and it helps me. Are doctors in training and medical students still performing pelvic exams on anesthetized women without their consent? I was surprised to learn this is still going on today. I would have expected it in teaching hospitals during the 1950s, but not in 2018. But in a recent, excellent article by Phoebe Friesen in the journal Bioethics, she notes that the practice is still alive and well in many US and UK medical schools. It is difficult to know exactly how often this is happening. Most medical school faculties and students don't talk about this publicly, and affected patients are, by definition, unaware it's even happening. Soothes. It makes my blood boil. However, Friesen notes that a survey at the University of Oklahoma in 2005 found that a large majority of medical students had given pelvic exams to gynecologic surgery patients who were under anesthesia, and that in nearly 3/4 of these cases, the woman had not consented to the exam. Similarly, a UK survey reported that at least 24% of intimate examinations they performed on anesthetized patients occurred without any consent, and that on many occasions, more than one student examined the same patient. Of course, there are medically appropriate reasons to perform a pelvic exam on an unconscious woman as part of a legitimate treatment plan. For instance, to plan placement of a surgical instrument before removing a gynecological tumor. And this type of exam is covered by the standard informed consent process prior to surgery. The more troubling cases involve situations where the patient is unconscious and then senior attending surgeon at the teaching hospital invites medical students and trainees to perform pelvic exams not for therapeutic purposes, but for practice purposes without obtaining the patient's consent beforehand. As a bioethicist, Arthur Kaplan describes, sometimes more than one student will practice the exam with many sets of gloved fingers in the patient's vagina without their knowledge. When I mention this to some of my non-medical friends, both male and female, their dominant reactions are horror and anger. One friend pointedly asked, "How is that not rape?" Friesen also discussed some attempted justifications for this practice. One common argument is that it's good for society. The practice will make the trainee a better doctor, which will benefit future patients, even if it doesn't benefit the current patient being examined. Another common argument is that it's no big deal, and it's a relatively minor act that causes no harm. To whom? To whom? A third attempted justification is that the patients coming to a teaching hospital implicitly allow their bodies to be used for education purposes, and that no further explicit consent for such pelvic exam is necessary. I could feel my blood boiling inside of my body. Friesen quoted 2 representative examples of opinions for and against the practice from an online discussion forum, studentdoctor.net. Supporting this practice, Amory Blaine wrote, "It's surprising how worked up some people get over this issue. You'll be naked on a brightly lit table for all to see. A medical student will put a tube into your bladder. We're about to flay your belly open and remove your uterus and ovaries. But to do a pelvic exam? What a violation. If you get into the habit of being this deathly afraid of patients' feelings about an internal exam, you will never learn how. I am not saying you should be a jerk about it, but you owe it to your future patients to get some idea of what stuff feels like." Opposing this practice, they say, "I'm cringing a little at this thread. As a female student not yet in the medical field, I am disturbed to hear that by consenting to surgery, I risk having someone literally in my vagina without consent for purposes that benefit only the providers and not me. Are patients really viewed as a teaching tool rather than a human being? That I would be splayed and sliced during the procedure doesn't mean that additional indignities are acceptable. It is still my vagina. Even if I am naked and unconscious, I did not lend it to anyone to practice techniques." Surveys of patients support the second viewpoint expressed. Friesen notes that the vast majority, 72 to 100% of women, say they expect to be specifically consented for an educational pelvic exam performed while they are under anesthesia, and that many women said they would feel physically assaulted if not consented. I want to hear your opinions on this, but really at the end of the day, I think we need to be talking about this as a society, and we need to let people know that this is a thing, because a lot of people, I think, are like, there's just no way that this is possible. Like, we're not in a time where they would do that to me. Like, we're in a time of consent. We're in a time where doctors would never perform an invasive vaginal exam on me, much less with 6 students doing the same without asking. And not only is that the case, it's happening as we speak, as I sit here right now filming this YouTube video. And likely the person it's happening to has no knowledge, has no idea that it's happening to them. And that, to me, my friends, is horrifying. I am in disbelief. And frankly, I can't even believe that this is a thing that we have to talk about of if it's okay or not. You don't have rights to my organs after I'm dead. If I don't want to donate my organs to you, I do not have to. You do not have rights to my body whilst I am alive, without my consent, while I'm under anesthesia, unable to defend myself or fend for myself, unable to tell you if something hurts or you're poking me in a wrong way. What do these people wake up and feel a sensation down there, have no idea what happened? That is unfathomably horrific to me, to know that this is happening. And it could have happened to me when I had my gallbladder out in, 2012 or 13, and I'll never know. Could have happened to me. How do I know it didn't? Who do I have to ask? Would they even be honest with me? Do they have to tell me if I ask? And I have no idea. And that is so violating, to strip me down naked when you're supposed to be working on my tummy, let's say, and then to be having multiple people down up into my vaginal canal without my consent. I'm sorry, but this feels wholly illegal to me. And the fact that this is happening currently as we speak, and that it's not only not illegal, that there are people at certain universities fighting for this to stay the way that it is very concerning to me. And it's really bothersome. And the fact that none of you guys know about this, and the fact that all of us out here are just learning this information from TikTok, is crazy to me. Absolutely mind-blowing. And I just thought that I would put this out there because I feel like, in a way, I have a responsibility. I have a platform. I have an audience. If 100,000 people watch this video, 90,000 of you probably didn't know this based on my results on Instagram. So you can share this information with your friends and your family. It's uncomfortable. I don't think we want to talk about this, but unfortunately, I think it's something that we have to. It doesn't seem like in the medical establishment they're going to be having these conversations with us. And again, I want to make this very clear. I am not against people that need to learn. I just think there needs to be consent given. And I'm sure this is not in every single case. I am sure that there are many people who are honest and forthcoming and forthright with their patients to let them know that this is either what's going to happen, get their consent. I know that there are many different people out there who are honest, good people and who may just work in this field. I don't want this to seem like I am attacking the medical profession in general. That's not the case at all. I am not like putting a blanket statement on like everybody's effed up. That's not at all what I'm doing. But this is a really messed up situation that a lot of people don't know about. And I thought I would just put it out there. I am not in the medical field. I do not know beyond what I have read on Google. I'm not claiming to be a professional. I don't know. What I do know though is that 72 to 100% of the people that were asked would feel extremely violated if they were touched in that way. So I think that lends to the idea that this isn't okay, because knowing that it has happened to many, many people without their consent, without their knowledge, without anybody telling them, it's disturbing and it's horrifying, and it has to stop, because these are people's lives. Like, you don't know what that person has been through mentally. You don't know what their background is. You don't know what kind of trauma they have. You don't know if that would send them over the edge into a mental health crisis if they found something like that out. You don't know anything about that situation, and you shouldn't need to, because you should always have to give consent. Always. Get consent. Always. Are you kidding me? This isn't a question. We know that when no consent is given, it's assault. Hands down, point blank, period. So that extends to the medical world as well. Unless it's an emergency and I need something done that is going to save my life. If it's a routine procedure and I'm going in for tonsillectomy, you do not have my permission to do an invasive vaginal exam. I'm sorry, you don't. I'm actually not sorry. You don't. Get the fuck out of my vagina. Excuse me. Get out. Pick it up. Take it out. Pick it up. Take it out. I just can't even believe this is a conversation that has to be had. Mind-blowing to me, and so many people didn't know about it, so I thought I would spread the word. And I would love to know the original creator that showed that video on TikTok. I have no idea who they are, because it was like months ago that I saw this, and it just came flashing back into my mind last night, and I had a nightmare of it happening to me. If you guys know any more about this or have any other links or any other resources, I would love to hear them. This video was literally just this, just to explain this, because I feel like when you have somewhere that people watch. It's not always my responsibility to talk about every single thing because it's literally humanly impossible, but this one in particular, so many people don't know about. This isn't like cycling on the news. This isn't like common knowledge. This isn't like, oh yeah, of course I've heard about that. People are like very shocked when they hear this news, like shocked and horror. Wait, what? And other people are like, this can't be real. It's real and it's happening. I will try to have any sort of resources or links down in the description of this video. Anything that is like petition signing or people that we can contact to stop this from happening, because it has to. It's disturbing and it's a problem. And if you don't see that, that is also disturbing and a problem, in my opinion. It's just my opinion, just my YouTube channel. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm so sorry that this is the video that I put out today, but I just felt it had to be said. All right, I will see you at my next video.